Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Silvavine podcast with your host, Michelle De Silva, a podcast that focuses on creating healing and awareness. In today's episode, Michelle is joined by Rachel, a transformative coach, and Aila, her daughter, a mother and daughter who share their personal journey of grief after Rachel losing her daughter, and Aila, her sister. Let's dive into today's episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Silvavine podcast with me as your host, Michelle De Silva. In today's episode, we have Rachel joining me today. Rachel is not only a transformative coach who helps clients reclaim personal balance and find clarity to a more profound sense of who they really are. Rachel's work is integrative, working both professional and personal, as both as an executive leadership and career coach, as well as an holistic life coach and mind-body practitioner. Rachel is with us today speaking about coaching through grief. She has insight into her own family journey of having to work through grief after suffering a loss. Thank you, Rachel, for joining me today and welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. Lovely welcome. Really, really pleased to be here.
And we also have lovely Aila joining us today. And Aila is your daughter, Rachel. And obviously, part of your family and your own personal journey, you had to experience that as a family. So I just wanted to say, Aila, thank you so much for joining us today. Aila is 15 and she will speak in about her journey and with regards to grief and going through it as a teenager. So thank you, Aila, and welcome. So Rachel, I think I'll begin with you. So were you always a coach? Where did your journey begin?
Yeah, so no, I wasn't always a coach. So originally, I was living in England. I was a lawyer. I qualified as a solicitor in the 1990s. Quickly became a partner. On the face of it, I was very, very successful, thriving under pressure. But the reality was, as the years went on, I was getting more and more exhausted, disenchanted, unhealthy, feeling pretty miserable. So I decided to leave the law and move to France, which I did after the birth of my second daughter. So that was Aila at the time. And we moved to France, and for a while I grew some veggies. Then I got bored, and I was thinking, what can I do with my life? What can I do with my life? And the thing I really had always loved about the law was the people aspect, helping people with problems, sharing knowledge, and that's how then I started to get into coaching and writing, and that was all great. And then I met my current husband while I was in France, Carl, and we got married, and Carl had a daughter, Caitlin, and the five of us, so that was myself and Lexi, my other daughter, Caitlin, and Aila, we in effect became a family of five, and I started carrying on coaching and I started to build that side of the business. And that's sort of how it all started. So new family, blended family, and was a full-time coach by that point.
And that must have been great, I suppose. Sorry, Rachel, that must have been great. You started off a new life, you started off a blended family, and it was almost like a second wave of life, was it?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I felt I'd met my calling, I'd found my soulmate in life. I had the privilege of another daughter, so there were three of us, three daughters, and Carl, and we were all working together. We were all living the dream really out in France. And my business was at that time I was more of an executive and a career coach, but it was really building. I had a really nice private clientele. I was working with some organizations, and life was pretty good. Yeah, and then we had a situation in 2014. So Carl and I used to go to the UK quite a bit for work to see with clients that I was working with in England, and he was working with an organisation. And one afternoon we had been in the UK. We were literally at the Eurotunnel waiting to come back, and at this time Caitlin, our eldest, she was at university in Bordeaux. She was doing her master's at that point, and she was living with her partner. She was living with her boyfriend, who we'd met, who'd been on holiday with us to Spain, and she'd been with him, at least 3 years by that sort of time. And there we were in the car, and we were just waiting to get back on the Eurotunnel to go home. And we were due to see Caitlin actually the following weekend when we got back. We were due to collect Lexi and Aila from their dads, and we were off to go and see Caitlin. Everything was fine. And there we were in the Eurotunnel, and we got the telephone call that no parent ever wants to hear. And Katie's boyfriend phoned us to say that he was locked outside the apartment and he couldn't get in, and the fire brigade were in there. And that Caitlin had been found dead. So yeah, so we were there, and then we got on the ferry on the Eurotunnel, and then we basically drove back to France. Well, Carl was able to drive back to France, which it was a good 8 hours to get home by that stage, and then find out all the details and what happened. So Caitlin had taken her own life. We didn't know why. We still don't really know why. Louis didn't know why. There were some notes left. And after all the formalities of putting Caitlin down to rest and the funeral and everything like that, obviously we had to then work out what to do now and deal with those initial stages of grief that a loved one has taken their own life, and the struggle then that all of us had to try and survive that and work out how to move on forward with our lives, because at first it didn't sink in. There was just numbness, and then it became denial. This couldn't be true. What's happened? And when we were driving from the UK back to France, we had no idea what had happened. We just knew that she'd gone. We don't know what she'd done or anything like that. And so there's that whole piece in your head of what's happened. Maybe there's a misunderstanding. It's just the whole world spins around you, and you just feel completely detached from any reality you've ever known. And to be honest, the days after, it was just a complete blur. I think that telling Lexi and Aila the news and trying to then keep us all together, keeping us healthy, showering, eating, even breathing, everything just felt like a monumental feat. But despite all that, there's this primal instinct in all of us to survive, that you'll get through it, to just get through every day, every week. But for me, it wasn't passive, because we were all at complete different stages. Carl felt certain things, I felt certain things, the girls both felt certain things. And I think, to be honest, it's actually now, 2 years later, that I actually feel like I've accepted every stage of the grief. Because it wasn't about acceptance in the beginning, that you go through all those different senses. You go through shock, you go through anger, you go through trying to rationalize it, you go through blame, you go through depression. And we all were at different stages throughout those last 2 years, and we had to sort of be together collectively and individually, if that sort of makes sense. So dealing with that, once I got to sort of feel that I could work through it, it then started to become an insight into my coaching work. And I think for me, that life experience has shaped my coaching approach, and how sort of I've worked there moving forward in my work. But yeah, it's that whole piece around turning pain into purpose. And so now the people that I work with, it's much more integrative than it used to be, and more of those combined sort of modalities of not only helping people with certain aspects of their professional life, but also really focusing on how important well-being is, and how disrupting either areas that don't serve us, or grief, or real challenges, how we can overcome those, either as part of a family or as individuals. Yeah, so that's sort of the story as to what happened, and it's made me now be one of those individuals that, whether it's in my own personal life and how I interact with friends and family, or whether it's with clients, but this whole piece around really wanting to prioritize the importance of self-care, and
Mm.
finding techniques and ways to really sort of manage stress and emotions, and underpinning this is that, how important healthy relationships are. And one of the things I always say to the girls is, it's all right to say you're having a really crap day and that you're feeling really down, but to share that with us, as long as we're all talking. We can create internal systems, external systems for support, but relationships, self-care, and finding purpose in life. I've found that all of us, it's taken us time to find that purpose. Carl, it's taken him over 2 years to find his purpose again. And how to move forward and honour the loss of Caitlin, so that now we smile and we sort of see her with us, as opposed to just focusing on the loss, focusing on all the lovely memories that she gave us and ways that we can honour her.
Mm.
And interestingly, within this story, part of the change that we needed as a family was, at the beginning of this year, we all up sticks and we moved back to the UK. So we're now speaking to you from the UK. We've been here now 4 months. It was like, for us, the last stage to create.
Mm.
Now we were all a bit more mentally stable and create that stability. Now then to move to the UK and start afresh, in effect. And Isla's obviously a big part of actually lives, had to change schools and everything too.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Rachel. I mean, whether it's 1 year, whether it's 2 years, whether it's 5 years, I think it's not as easy as sharing that as people may think. So I wanted to thank you and when we go on to speak to Isla, for thanking you for sharing your story too, because I don't think we realize how profound that actually can be. And you mentioned about going through certain stages and having to navigate that as a family, because here you are as a mum going through and sorting your own emotions, but then worrying about your daughters, and could they be being able to handling the situation to what they are going through currently? Because I'm sure there were times where you could have possibly thought, oh, what happens if they can't handle this grief and this hurt and this pain, and they might think to do something like that. Were those kind of thoughts that you perhaps had?
Yeah, I mean, I know that there's always that very irrational part of me that I have to sort of realize that I shouldn't just naturally jump to that sort of default that, Isla and Lexi respectively, are going to not be talking to me and make decisions. But as a parent, there is that potential to be overprotective, and I've tried really hard to respect Isla growing up and Lexi growing up, and be there but not be so overprotective that I'm suffocating them. So probably that question's one for Isla to see whether that's been successful. But it's really about it's about all of us just accepting that we're all human beings, and that the ups and downs in life, and feeling grief, and actually feeling and accepting that it's really natural to feel each of those stages of grief, that it's absolutely okay to feel denial, to feel despair, to feel depressed, to feel angry, to feel that there's something we could have done. Now I know that we couldn't have done anything because there were no signs, and they always say people who want to get found give you signs. That it's really a cry for help. In this situation, there were no signs, and that's what makes it even harder, because you're always going through the story and trying to second guess, could I have done this, could have done that. But ultimately, once you feel every aspect of the grief and you feel that it's okay to be in that space, then you acknowledge that actually, for Lexi and Isla, they need to feel every stage of it too, because you can't move forward unless you just accept. I think it's probably the acceptance. I've gone full cycle. And don't get me wrong, sometimes I dip back into it. There could be a particular week or something triggers a memory and I can slip back into, real anger again. But at the moment, I'm feeling I'm coming back to the acceptance and trying to use that grief as a powerful energy to sort of feel really humble for who I am, where I am in the world, and having two amazing daughters, but honouring how amazing Caitlin was as well.
Mm, mm. And Aila, for you, I mean, you were 13 at the time. What sort of emotions are you going through, as a 13-year-old, kind of trying to find your feet at this world at 13 and then having to go through such an experience?
But like everything so vividly because like I was at my dad's house, and then I remember my dad getting a call, or I think it was a message from my mum saying she wanted to pick us up, and my dad didn't know what was happening, but he knew it wasn't good. And then I told my sister Lexi, I think this is not going to be good. And we got to our house, and my mum was like really sad. She was wearing all black. And then they like told us everything. And like initially, like originally, I thought, oh, like, was it an act? Like, did she get hit by a car or something? Like, what happened? And then they said that she took her life. And I actually thought it was a joke. But like, it's not funny, but I thought it would be a joke. And then my sister Lexi, she was crying already because she's like, she believes anything really. So I was in disbelief originally, and then I kind of realized that it was true. And I think it really affected me because then for a while I had to see everyone around me, like my family, being really sad. And I wanted to be strong and like tell myself, no, I can do this, like it's not that bad. But then it was like really difficult because I was like really struggling mentally, and I like got really depressed. And then when I went back to school, I started like having a lot of panic attacks and like missing a lot of lessons, like asking the teacher if I could go to the nurses or something because I was really not good. But then a lot of people were telling me that I was being like dramatic and that I should just get over it. But it was really difficult because I mean, Caitlin, she was like, we just clicked like when I was 4, and I met her until like 4 to 13 years old. I was like really close to her, and she was just the person I used to look up to a lot, and so it was really difficult. And then I remember losing a lot of friends because they were all getting tired of me not being mentally stable, and it was just like really difficult. And then I got a lot of trust issues because I was telling myself I can't really tell people about this because it's going to be difficult to make new friends, make new relationships. And then I thought also I should add that it's very difficult when you're meeting someone new and you have to actually present yourself, and they're like, oh, so how many siblings do you have? Am I supposed to say I have 2, or am I supposed to go in depth with what happened and explain them? And I think it's just really, like my mum said, it was really just the stages of grief, and it was just really difficult for me to process. And then I think I finally just accepted it and found passions that helped me go through it and stuff. Yeah.
Thank you, Aila, for sharing that. And it's quite sad that your friends around you couldn't see it. But I suppose that's probably their lack of understanding and their lack of experience to actually understand the processes that you were going through at the time. And it's you saying that exactly about finding yourself in situations now as a teenager going, how do I answer these questions? Do I say I had two and one of my sisters died? Or do I say I initially had three without people? And then I suppose it's been reminded every single time of like, how do I navigate? What's my new narrative in this world? How am I supposed to do? How am I not supposed to do? And I suppose you probably have so much questions going on around in your head, but you don't know what is right, which is wrong, which way to go, which way not to go.
Yeah,
But you
exactly.
both have mentioned, speaking to you both have mentioned saying, that you finally got to the point of acceptance with regards to her passing. If anybody's going through this processes of grief now, and they were in dismay of feeling like there was no way to go forward and felt like they couldn't, how do they get to the point of acceptance?
Do you want to go first, Aila, or do you want me to speak?
I'll go first if you want. Okay, so I was gonna say that I think you grow up really quickly, like if you're a bit younger, because I feel like I matured a lot faster than I should have for a 13-year-old. But like, if you know people that are going through the same, there's not only you, because I mean, I thought that it was the end of it, like you said, but there is always a way out. You just have to like talk to your family, your friends, and try to keep in contact with people, and just kind of remind yourself that that is like showing how precious life is, because you can literally just go and snap your fingers, and you have to like work hard and try to find something to hold on to, like a passion.
So, hi, Isla, did you not find that difficult when your friends were trying to kind of shut you down, or didn't want to put in much effort with regards because you kind of where they told you to kind of snap out of it, like get over it? Did that not put more pressure on you as a teenager to not want to open up? Or do you think that there was a part of you where you thought, no, actually, I do need to open up?
Well, that's when it comes to the point where like I just felt really lonely, and then I opened a social media account to spread awareness about mental health and well-being, because it got to the point where people weren't listening to me, and I wanted people on social media and online platforms to understand that there is a way, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. But it's true that a lot of people don't want to listen to you because they're too busy trying to live a normal life when you're stuck living not the life they want you to live with, you know?
Mm, yeah. So, I mean, that sounds great what you're doing. So tell me a little bit more about this platform that you've created then.
Well, a lot of like, so there's people that don't really agree with my mental health at the time. They don't agree with it, but I made a TikTok account about, I don't know if it was before, or I think it was a bit, but maybe before. I think it was after, maybe. So I just like, it's kind of like a personal blog, but then I also have a YouTube account and I just do vlogs. But on the TikTok account, I talk about mental health, about being a teenager, the struggles of school, the stress, grades, and like just like relatable content that people can talk to and reach out to me if they want to talk about it, so I can hopefully help. And also I try to help people if they comment on my videos saying, oh, I understand so much, this video was so relatable. I'm like, if you want to talk anytime, here are my details, like you can talk to me. And then I usually actually do help a few, and now they're a bit better, so yeah.
That sounds lovely, Aila.
So I
And
think,
that's what you said earlier, Rachel, about having to refine that purpose, and
yeah,
refocus that purpose again to going forward.
yeah, I think what now looking back on it, I think, Isla and I have discussed this before. I think at the time that Isla was finding that there were individuals at school when we were in France who didn't necessarily understand how difficult it was for Isla to try and navigate all these different stages of grief, and that sometimes she might come across to people as being, as Isla calls it, the neurotic teenager that wasn't particularly stable. And for those people that she then felt that she couldn't speak to, and they, quite awfully actually, they those friends, as Isla always says, she realised they weren't friends because she was difficult. She wasn't as, happy-go-lucky as other kids. And so, with hindsight, Isla and I have thought that maybe that was one of the reasons she actually started doing that on the social media. It was her way of processing her own grief
Mm.
because she didn't have some friends that she could share this with at the time. So it almost sort of started as a bit of a cathartic thing, like, in the same way that people write diaries or journal. Isla started doing that, and I think part of it was for her, because I didn't realize it at the time. Part of it was for her own processing grief. I imagine that there was part of it so the people who were saying, why are you not happy at school, you're always miserable, she was saying, look, there are deep seated things. So part of it was probably a little bit of a cry for help as well at the time. But now Isla feels more comfortable with where she is mentally and physically. I think she's carried it through with more confidence, with actually it's quite a good thing because it can speak to other people. Whereas I think in the early days it was a bit more personal. It was just her way of being able to get those feelings out there. And it's a really good example how we are all different. The way I deal with loss and navigate loss and grief is different the way Isla has done, and is completely different the way Carl's done. We all deal with grief in different ways. So I think the biggest takeaway for me in helping people or supporting people or just listening to people go through any kind of grief or loss is firstly to acknowledge that we are all unique, and that actually it's absolutely fine to feel rubbish, and it's absolutely fine to feel all those different sensations. And actually, when we embrace them and feel that's part of being a human being, that's what helped me get through it.
Mm.
Because there isn't a right or a wrong way to grieve. We're all absolutely individual. So yeah, it's this whole piece of acknowledging that we're human, that there is a future, that we can get through it, but it'll take us all different time, different approaches, and then to focus on things that we know do nourish us. So, something we try and do as a family is to prioritize on the good things and the well-being, and prioritizing sleep and good nutrition and exercise and the outdoor. And, we got a dog. Which she's been an absolute breath of fresh air. Isla's smiling, but Ulka has come into our life, and I think I'm right in saying this, Isla. She's really filled a void for all four of us, hasn't she? We all,
Yeah.
and I remember feeling quite sort of thinking it was a bit strange when we're going to get a dog. Is this okay? That the dog's filling a void, and is that a big problem? And then actually just sitting back and going, well, so what? So what if it's filling a void? That's what we all need. That's what we need as a family.
Mm.
So this bundle of excitement, beautiful poodle that she is, has brought a smile to all of our faces when sometimes we've had a rough day.
Mm. I think what you just said there, Rachel, in terms of people who are going through this process, that there's no right or wrong way of doing it. And there are going to be times, because I would imagine, and because you mentioned Isla, that, your friends were saying, like, come on now, why can't you just move on? So I would imagine that going through the process, there is perhaps a little bit of pressure to actually move on now. And it's going
Oh,
back to you saying, that it's okay. Like, even though you might think you're at this stage, you might have a day where you feel like you're on stage one, where somebody has said to you that that's stage one. And that's still okay, because you are going to perhaps go forward or back. And this pressure that we have to be in certain stages to finally move on. It doesn't have to be there. So if you are having days where you feel like you're going backwards, or you feel like you just you can't cope, that's okay too, and that's part of the process. So I think, those who are going out or going through this grief and this process that people are going through, it's understanding. And you mentioned about, Rachel, there was a point where you as a family spoke about like speaking more and speaking about your feelings, but it's 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 so natural for us to, when we are feeling this way, to close up and to not communicate. So how
Yeah,
do we get past that? How do we get past that as human beings too? Because I know from personal experience myself, where I'm feeling low, I don't want to talk to somebody. I do want to shut down. I do want to lock myself in a room. I do want to block everyone out. And a lot of people who go through really hurtful experiences, who do come out of the other side, all say like, just speak. But when you are going through those emotions, it's hard for us to do that.
absolutely. And and I think that it's okay to want to shut the door and want to have the silence and the space, and to feel comfortable that, it might take me 2 months in a space, it might take Isla 3 weeks in a space, it might take you 2 years in a space. We're all, depending on what we're feeling, that it's actually okay to have times where we don't want to be near people as well. And that's okay. Um, but there comes a point where what we don't want, there's a difference between having feelings and wanting to have that space and just to let it sit with you and let the grief sit with you, than let the grief fester with you. I think once I started to feel that, there were moments if Carl or Ryla or Lexi were festering in a space, just to be curious about wanting to have the opportunity to have the conversation. And if Isla said, actually, Mum, I still don't want to talk about it, then that's fine too. But I was just touching in, and I'd say, should we go and go for a walk, or should we go and sit in the sauna together? We used to sit in a sauna together and have big conversations, didn't we? Either it was like the time where it was just mum and daughter would have half an hour where no one else was there, and we would just talk about stuff, and it didn't even have to go anywhere. It was just that whole space of giving giving each other the opportunity to talk about the issues that were upsetting us if we wanted to, but equally could be about something completely different. But I think it's just knowing that there are people there that are willing to talk if you want to, but there's no pressure to do it, because as you said, healing takes time and we're all so unique.
Hmm. And it's almost like you've just said there, it's like taking her out and doing stuff. So it's recognizing, I suppose, people who are going through the difficult times equally, is that seeing if they are having feelings where actually, let's move on from grief or anything that somebody's going through now, is not allowing them to actually fester and allow that to kind of manifest and absorb the energy to the point where they feel like they can't cope with life anymore. But
Yeah.
changing the energy, because you mentioned earlier, Rachel, about as a family now, which probably doesn't take away the pain altogether. There's always going to be an element of that love and that missing. But it's like, celebrating her in a different way, and celebrating and thinking about the joy that she brought in for the time that she was around us, instead of focusing on actually the devastation with the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And there are sort of 2 points in there. So the first one, when you were talking about changing the energy at the end of each stages, I think it's really important to acknowledge that because we are all different, we might get through a particular stage of grief and then move forward 3 stages. And I might think I'm dealing with something, or Isla might think that she's coming to terms or accepting something. And then it was all so equally normal that we might all backtrack again a few steps. So it wasn't linear, because there could be a trigger, and then that could put us down a bit of a dark path for a few days or weeks, near birthdays or Christmas or holidays, and that was absolutely fine too, to either want to experience and feel that sadness privately or as a collective. So that was just the first point. And then, yeah, you're absolutely right. I think we all got to a stage where we had moments where certain individuals of the family could start incorporating Caitlin into the conversation. So what I mean by that is, by the second anniversary after she died, we would not feel quite as uncomfortable as sitting around, a table in the evening on a summer holiday and saying, Caitlin's here, and she would become part of the conversation, or Caitlin would love this, or Caitlin would have this on the menu. And we actually all felt a bit more comfortable about saying that in a way that we didn't in the early days. So she's part of us and she starts coming with us on the journey. Another really good example is we sort of as a family started every now and again, if we saw a particular kind of bird, a robin that would come and, hang around a bit too long, we'd think that was Caitlin just coming to say hello. And whether it is or it isn't, all of us we like the fact that we can incorporate nature or certain events that Caitlin's with us at times. We went to see a house because we've moved back to UK, we're in rented, we're looking at where we might want to buy, and we saw one particular house earlier this week, and while we were in the garden, a robin was standing on the fence and came and looked and was sort of moving its head. And I looked at Carl and I looked at Aila, and in my head, whether this is right, wrong, and different, that was Caitlin telling me, this looks like a good house. Maybe this is the one that you should go for. And ironically, it's the one we are going for. But the robin was there to sort of be with us. And everybody's different. Not everyone needs to see a robin. But for us as a family, there are certain things that then bring us joy because she is part of the journey. Would you agree, Aila? Have you started to feel that a little bit, or do you feel different emotions around that?
I totally agree, because I remember when I once was really sad about the friend situation and Caitlin. So I remember I used to walk out sometimes just to get some fresh air, and I just laid on the grass in this field and I was looking at the sky, and then 3 white butterflies, and Caitlin's favourite colour was white, were just flying around, and it made me think of me, Lexi, and her. Which is actually, I want to get a tattoo now of 3 butterflies, because I want her to be like on my body, like representing her. But yeah, I agree definitely that you can get like signs, and you just sometimes you feel like they are here, like the people you're missing, they are here, and they're helping you through your times and your stresses and worries in life, and they're just watching over you and taking care of you and stuff.
Isla, if there are like other teenagers, young adults that are going through what you've had to go through and are early on in the stages of experiencing a loss like this, as a young person going through what you've been through, that's not to say that there's an end of your process. What advice could you give them who are really struggling at the moment?
I would say, just the thought that you need to like, it's okay to take a break from socializing or school or your work and stuff like that. Just if you want to stay in bed all day and just think or cry, just let it out, feel it how it is. Understand that it's normal to feel down, and that it can be really hard, and that you really might be on the edge, but then you have to remember that this is very precious. And I mean, for example, you could actually theoretically like die tomorrow, and like that would be the end of it. So you never know how long you're going to live for. So try to live it to the fullest and communicate with others. Find passions that help you. So like painting, it can help you feel with the colours, the emotions. That helps me sometimes. Or like acting, dancing. You can even do some sport, like to release some feelings, boxing to release some anger. just try to find something that you really hold on to and that you can try to help you go through this. Now, also, I think you have to just understand that some people might not want to hear how you're feeling, but you just need to accept that they don't want to hear that and just try to find someone or something that will, so like a diary, a person, a therapist maybe, or even a dog or a cat or a pet, because they can help lots too. Yeah.
Do you know, until you've said that, I hadn't actually given it much thought that, as harsh as it may sound, is that even though that you were going through an experience of having the loss of your sister, you still then had to experience the ignorance of other children or inexperience of other children of not actually them understanding your situation. And I had never ever thought about that before until you've said that. So that's even new to me. So I wanted to say thank you for sharing that, because this is something that we can all maybe take away and understand, is that we need to be more sympathetic to somebody else's emotions, and that they might be going through a really, really difficult time. And it's unfair of us to say, come on now, let's get over it. So for, I suppose, those people, or could be young adults who haven't experienced something like this, and having your experience in terms of navigating this through your own friends, what bit of information could you share with them that could perhaps give them a bit of understanding on how people who haven't gone through this process to treat others who are going through something like this?
I think also, like you're saying, we should just try to be here for them, because if someone like I wouldn't advise to ask someone exactly how they are, because it can be pressuring. Because if you're feeling really down, you don't know what it is, or if you're feeling empty, there's no emotion, like you don't know how to describe this pain that you have, because you've never felt it before. I mean, the loss of my sister was just like, I never felt that way ever. So I would say just try to listen to them and don't give too many judgmental opinions. So like saying, oh, okay, well, that's a bit silly, or, oh, well, she shouldn't have done that, because it's like you can't bring her back, so don't tell her what she should have done or shouldn't, and just try to be open about the situation with them and hear them out. And also maybe just even like trying to help them forget for like a day, because I found a guy friend that really helped me through it, and he was with me all summer when I was feeling down, and we just like hang out and just talk, or just like have fun, be young again, like I wasn't growing up too fast or maturing, and just live my life. And try not to trigger anything for people. If you know they have certain triggers or something that can be related to it, don't trigger it too much. Like a lot of people do the joke of like, oh, I'm so tired of school, I just want to end my life. But then it's like kind of not funny for the people that have experienced someone like going through that or like doing it. Yeah.
Thank you, Aila. That's really powerful and a great bit of advice, actually. Just being there and hearing what they have to say without any judgment or comments will certainly help. And Rachel, in terms of being a mum and navigating through this as a mum, for other mums who are out there who are struggling, what advice would you give to them?
Just to be there, to give your children the space they need, the support they need, but not to suffocate them. To again, as I said, there's no right or wrong way to grieve, and that to respect that everybody's at a different stage in the journey. For those mums and dads who are feeling it with their kids, they're also feeling presently the loss, if it's a family friend or a loved one. And just to lean into that vulnerability and give them the space, but also the support that you're going to love them unconditionally no matter what, but acknowledging that grief takes its toll physically, emotionally. So prioritizing things like good sleep, nutrition, as Isla said, acknowledging that sometimes it's really important to give kids the opportunity to just be a kid again. Isla has she really benefited from having sort of a different approaches. So sometimes being able to just do stuff with a friend and forget about it. Other times, spending time getting professional support and getting the guidance and support of different therapists at different stages of her own journey and grief. Connecting with other kinds of communities and support groups. So sharing those feelings with peers or people that might be in a similar situation as you, who aren't necessarily connected to you by your family, and just to acknowledge that there are good days and bad days, and that's absolutely normal too.
Mhm.
And Isla took a lot of joy, as she said, sometimes losing herself in creative pursuits. Like she started doing more painting and things that she liked, other things, like acting, and spaces where she could just lose herself and for half an hour or an hour not have to think about some of those realities of day to day. But then also with time and with patience, acknowledging that actually eventually go full circle, and then you get to a point where actually the reality, the hurt's still there, the grief's still there, it never goes away. You just find different ways to deal with it and to cope with it. So yeah, my suggestions to any parents that are going through what we've been through is to acknowledge the space, respect everybody's individuality, but also you as a collective unit, and really to feel every emotion, and that's cool, and to connect with external groups, support groups, professional help as well where needed.
But
So everything.
what you've just said there about external help also, I'd imagine navigating it through as a woman, ordinarily we are givers naturally, but then being a mum and going through something like this, you could possibly fall into the trap of always being there for somebody else and forget about your own grief. And I suppose this is where you could come in, Rachel, if you find a coach that you could also work with, where you are able to express yourself and help navigate, because I would imagine sometimes through the process you could forget about yourself by
Yep.
prioritizing everybody else also.
Yep, absolutely. And you need different kinds of professional support for different things. So um, Isla's had, for example, she's had therapeutic support in different areas, with medically trained specialists in the therapy space. And then, coaching is a different kind of non-directional support where we can untangle and unravel and think about how to prioritize certain life areas, and really being able to have a space to unpack all those different feelings of grief and feel, okay, so how can I prioritize my wellness at this difficult time, for example. But really, I think a multilateral approach from all different kinds of disciplines, all different kinds of avenues, that real holistic perspective, whether it's internally within your family, within the wider friend network, with professionals, with wider community groups. As I say, everyone's different, but for us as a family, we found that all those different kinds of approaches have served us at different times, at different stages of our journey.
Oh, and I just wanted to thank you so both for coming on. It's been such an honor to have both of you on, and Aila for coming on and expressing yourself the way you've done. I'm just in awe. So thank you very, very much. And Rachel, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Is there any last parting words that you guys would like to share before we close up today?
No, just that healing takes time, whatever that looks like for everybody. But that there is acknowledge that there is life after grief. It just takes time, and we're both excited, and the rest of our family are excited with what the future holds. It's taken us a while to get there, but it's all exciting and it's all good, and we'll be taking Caitlin on that journey with us. So there definitely is life after loss. It just takes time.
Thank you, Rachel. And you, Aila?
I would say, just remember that you can do this, and that you can always find people to talk to, and it's literally, like, I mean this from the bottom of my heart, it's okay not to be okay, and you just need to, like, find passions and just try to not be pressured by the people's opinions and thoughts about what you're doing with your life, because it's okay to be a bit sad or a bit lazy some mornings. So yeah.
Thank you, Aila. All right. Thank you so both. Thank you so much.